Two girls, no fights. Two girls, no fights. Hi everybody, welcome to Two Girls,
No Fucks.
And today we are
talking about polyamory.
Again.
Yes.
But this time we brought a guest.
A very special guest.
Very special guest. Zandi runs the James Black Gallery. If you've never been there, it's fucking awesome. It looks beautiful. It acts beautiful. It's aesthetically fucking terrific. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm going to say about that. We'll put a link to the James Black Gallery down here. I would love to start off talking about what your experience with poly is. And go from there.
I have like a funny thing where I once found like a journal of mine from when I was 12 where I wrote like, I have a crush on like 3 people and I have 6 people who have a crush on me. Why is one crush like take away from another crush? Why can't we be with other people? So like even as like a little kid, even though I had been in like a super Christian, rigidly like 1950s nuclear family lifestyle younger, I still felt that these things were weird. Mm-hmm. I didn't actually end up getting into any of those things, but this is me being like not the best. I would get really drunk when I was like 18, and my partner at the time, I'd be like, why can't we be like non-monogamy club? And I'd like make out with people. And so, but I didn't have the language. I didn't know that that was even a thing. So it was obvious that that was something that I thought was important and made sense to me. And I never really was like a jealousy sort of person. Not to say that people can't be jealous in poly lifestyle, but when I moved from Portland, Oregon up to Vancouver, BC, I'm not really sure how I found the information, or if it just came to me on like Tumblr or associated people. But I was like, this is me, this makes sense. And so that was 2011. And so I've been in some like Vancouver poly groups and, you know, done a lot of different types of reading. Read The Ethical Slut and More Than Two.
Great read, by the way, for those of you looking to explore.
Mm-hmm. And, but I still ended up in like more of like a hierarchical, like primary relationship. We were open, but my partner didn't really explore too much, mostly me. But it wasn't where it was like full relationships, more like hookup type of things. And then, and then I've had a variety of poly experiences and different types of relationships since. So it's been a long process.
Awesome. It sounds like almost in that, when we talked about it in the last video, you kind of have paralleling experiences like from childhood, because there was a journal entry or something that you had. I didn't want to jump in and be like, me too, because I got excited. But similar, whereas I had relationships when I was young. Like in my journal entry, there was a girl and we both liked the same guy. We just decided to all date, all of us. Very similar when you said, oh, I was bad. It's like that was my discovery of like, back then, just cheating on everybody all the time and being like, I don't get it. Like, I know I'm a good person. Like, I know, you know, not that cheating makes you a bad person. It was one of those things where it's like, why do I keep doing this? Why do I keep doing this? And it's only when I became, you know, when I got into a relationship with 2 people that, you know, it was like a throuple. I know some of you hate that word, but it was a throuple. It was indeed a throuple. It was.
It was, and I loved it. You know, I loved that. And so, very parallel. Yes. So for you, it was looking back at a journal entry, and then 2011, all the way to now. That's,
and moving to Vancouver. So what is the community like here in terms of, I've met people when I've been out and stuff like that are poly, and I've talked a bit about it, but I just was curious, like, how much of a community is there? What are those groups like that you're a part of?
You know, I haven't really gone to any of the, like, Van Poly events. I think that I enjoy the, like, aspect of, like, discussion and being able to, like, talk about certain topics that exist on the, like, internet side of things. And that's just me. I say that, however, OkCupid has a fantastic, like, system for, like, non-monogamy and, like, people who, like, prescribe by that. Like, if you're most dating apps don't really have that setting, but they do. And so, you know, you end up finding out some people who you didn't even know were identify that way. And then it also has like multiple options for like what you're looking for. Short-term, long-term, partner, and it even has links where you can link your partner to you. Like if you have a primary, so you can link your two different dating profiles, so they know who you're dating, which is quite fantastic.
That is really nice. Yeah. That's what we call transparency, which is nice. Now let me ask you this, because the relationship that I was in, the throuple, was how many years ago?
Like 2013, 14, 15, around then.
Yeah, and I didn't really have the verbiage. Like when I married Jay, we talked about we're open. Mm-hmm. But throughout the relationship, I had always brought up, like, maybe one day we'll find a third and live together, all live together. Like, I still stand by that. It's my dream outcome. I didn't have the language to say, like, I'm poly. I still don't have the language to say I'm poly. But this is my question for you, because I'm relatively new still. We are all, for lack of a better word, it's ingrained in us, this monogamous culture. You know, not for everybody, but for a lot of people. And I cannot help but feel like I'm, even if I'm transparent, open, discussion, all that stuff, I can't help but feel like I'm cheating sometimes. You know, like this, it's ingrained in me that I'm doing something wrong. And I wondered if that ever came up for you, and if it did, you know, did it ever go away, or you know?
No, not really, because I never felt like what I was doing with one person countered what I was doing with someone else.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But if my partner was having hard feelings about something that I've been participating in, that reflects, and I feel ways, you know? It's like, if they're like not comfortable with another person that I'm seeing, like, that's gonna impact my feelings around what I'm doing and how much time I'm spending with them, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
We are in a bubble, a circle where you have one toxic relationship, the emotions reverb through the rest, right?
Yes.
So there's things like that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So how do you manage that if, for example, you have a primary, let's say, and then you are interested in someone else, and then your primary person is not necessarily on board with it, or is uncomfortable with it, or isn't a fan of that person? Is it just completely subjective to every relationship, or is there kind of like more of like, we are committed to being in this non-monogamous relationship together, so I should still have the freedom to explore what I want to explore when I want to explore it? Or is there a commitment to the primary person that if you identify them as your primary, that it always has to be a mutual decision in terms of like exploring other relationships?
Yeah, I think that's going to depend on the relationship. One thing I want to point out, there's a really lovely term that's come up and shifted gears called anchor partner. And so utilizing that instead of primary partner, where it's about like someone who's like really built into your life. In those sort of relationships, people can end up being like, I don't want to know anything about this other relationship. And like, that can be a boundary. But when you start setting rules or like adding vetoes or ultimatums, you're basically already in like a losing battle.
Yeah.
That's just trying to exert control, and boundaries are things that you can control about like your world and your space, but that's you putting it on theirs, right?
Yeah.
And so that's something that can come up in those situations. What I would say is dependent on the communication before you are getting into relationships or you know, connections with other people. That's where you're going to set like the tone of like, do I have any sort of say, you know? Like, people can be like, hey, I really, you know, want to be able to be around your other partners, so if I can meet them at least once, it'll make me feel a lot better, like things like that, right? But or be like, you have to tell me before you ever hook up with someone. Some relationships need that like amount of transparency, right? While others, I have a partner who we don't even tell each other if we were ever on Tinder dates or anything like that until we're like seeing someone. Then we're like, oh, so and so. Yeah. And it's like, oh, who is that, right? Yeah. So it just really depends, right?
Yeah, I like that. See, so this was my question. When I say to you, my ideal situation would be to have my anchor partner, let's say, and we meet somebody else, and the three of us cohabitate. Obviously, there's not just me in the equation, right? Like in life, it's like what you want, and then there's also what your partner wants and what everybody else wants. Would you view that as me being polyamorous, or would you, if you would know, would there be another term for that?
I mean, that's still under the umbrella of non-monogamy.
Yeah.
So, like, you can just even stick to that versus maybe using polyamorous. But the thing is I have a feeling, like, yeah, let's say you're in this, like, triad.
Yeah.
And it's so cute, so lovely. 5 years pass by. Maybe one of them still wants to, like, have little moments with other people,
which
right?
I would be totally into. Yeah.
So that's still going to be, you know, those sort of conversations. And even if you guys are each other's anchor partners as a trio, you're still exploring in other ways.
I'm into that.
I see your face right now. You're like, yes,
I'm into that. I mean, I know myself so well. I don't know if it's my sense of community, or I just love the idea of conquering the world as a team. You know, I do.
Yeah,
I can't, like, it's since I was young. Since I was young, I had, like, it's this, and when people ask me, like, what is it about it? I cannot put a finger on it. It just, when I was with that married couple, it was not the right people.
Yeah.
The situation was great. Sometimes they would go on vacation together. I'd have the house to myself, like, fucking amazing. And sometimes I'd go on a date with one of them. And so it was great. Like, it was amazing. I loved that. I loved the family aspect of it. And we're all different ways for different reasons, right? We all have our life experience, but I am very drawn to that. I'm drawn to that scenario. With, of course, I'm not a jealous person at all. And I love the idea of my partner meeting somebody cool. And I'm like, I want to meet them. If you want. I want to love them, not like, I mean, I want to love them, but I want to support them and find out about them and, like, you know, uplift them. It's like for me, there's so much love to give, you know?
Yeah. I think that the term anchor partner is really such a great term, and it really encompasses more of what I think you're wanting.
Yeah.
Than, like, primary and stuff like that, because it does kind of single out, like, and almost put a level to, like, the commitment or the connection with each person.
Yeah.
Whereas an anchor person is just like, that's your ground level, like, this is who you're doing it with. And then I could totally see this working for you with, you have your anchors, your triad of anchors, and then just everyone's kind of, like, still open, having open, you know what I mean? But
I mean, it's in theory, it's great. There's always this concept, though, that there's not just me in a relationship, or, like, for you out there that are trying it, it's like there's what you want, and then that's the thing too, is that what I've discovered is that in a monogamous relationship, there's two people, and you work together towards your goals, and there's the two opinions, and then when you add more people in, it, you know, inevitably becomes, it's a beautiful thing, becomes more complicated for that reason, you know.
Yep.
And so that brings us to one of the main reasons that Zandi's here, and that's to talk about cheating within polyamory. Which I'm, you know, I even said when they sat down, it's like, holy shit, like, as much as I think that I've never done that within poly, because I am very transparent and communicative, you know, I'm interested in hearing what your take on it is, because you don't know what you don't know, you know?
As an adult, if you've already figured out, like, what your needs and wants are, maybe, like, your value system and things like that, if you're choosing to, like, tell someone something and then actually break that agreement and break those boundaries and those commitments, like, that's where that starts to come up, right?
Yeah.
As far as, like, cheating goes, though, that's where it is at. It's like, you've made a commitment. Let's say that you're in a hierarchical relationship, and, like, I'm not really into hierarchical relationships, but
What is a hierarchical? Yeah, what's a hierarchical?
So that would be where it's, like, primary, secondary sort of thing, and you state those, like, that's strongly.
So, different boundaries and commitments.
So, like, let's say Evada and I are in a relationship, and then I meet you, and I'm like, this is my primary.
Yes.
And then now you will never...
I know I can never have, like, what you two have together.
Got it. That would be a hierarchical.
Yes.
Okay,
so... So in my situation, I was seeing someone. I was actually seeing 4 people at the time, and this person was really into me, and they just, like, really gunning for it, and they really wanted us to be, like, a thing. And I said, I don't really do that. And I told them what I would expect out of a partner that I would have that sort of relationship with, right? Like, being able to, like, be responsible for your own needs, you know, certain types of, like, communication styles, things like that. Anyways, I ended up getting into that relationship with that person. Now I go back and I'm like,
hindsight is 20/20.
Yeah, of course.
And when we talked, like, I didn't say that I would do, like, secondary sort of things, but they said that they were like, you know, It's hard for me to imagine loving more than one person, so I would want to be able to, like, have secondary, like, fling type things where, and it's not flings like, oh, one night stands, but, like, they're still, like, emotionally close, but not building up into, like, this, like, anchor relationship of, like, consistent attention, right?
Yeah.
Anyways, the first secondary that came around, it ended up being, like, we had a conversation the night before of their first date to double check.
Yeah.
Hey, what are your expectations with this relationship? Like, what sort of, you know, reconfirm. After their first date, reconfirm.
Yeah.
And it was just, like, a really, like, extended, like, stressful situation. So the whole time was us just trying to exert boundaries, trying to set things in line, and they would always try to cross every boundary. And it was really intense.
And exhausting, I bet.
Anyways, that made me learn about something where it's if you, let's say you have a metamor, which is like your partner's partner type of thing, and that metamor is really disrespectful, crosses your boundaries, maybe abusive behavior, right? Yeah, you're gonna fixate on that person. However, it is actually your partner's responsibility to kind of protect you and shield you from those sort of things. Like, that's their job.
Yes.
This situation sort of ended up in something called triangulation. Do you know what that is?
I don't.
No.
So, there's something called the drama triangle.
Yeah.
And in it, there's the rescuer.
Yeah.
The victim.
Yes.
And then the perpetrator. And so what happens is when, let's say, you and I, there's conflict happening between us.
Got it.
Well, we rope you in to it to help mediate and save or fix the situation, rather than us being able to handle it. Or, like, maybe it's your work to do, right? And this can happen quite commonly in triad situations, actually. FYI.
Yeah.
And so what happened is, like, in this particular situation, the person was like, oh, I'm still so hurt by my last partner. They had not done any healing work. They'd, like, jumped straight from that into this. And so we were doing emotional labor of, like, dealing with that. But then it was also like, oh, but they're so hurt about the thing. They just don't know better. They're not self-aware. You know, like, there was all this, like, compassion. And so it can be hard when things feel, like, exciting and fresh and new to wanna, like, keep distance between that, but that's intentionality, and that's part of, like, what's really important in poly relationships. You can actually choose to grow a relationship or not.
Mindfulness. What Zandi is experiencing is mindfulness, because when you're able to have a front row seat into what's going on in your brain and say, wait a minute, there's this crush. It's very similar to NRE, which is new relationship energy, but when you have a crush on somebody, it's so easy to, like, lose yourself in that. And if you're able to catch it and, you know, and just say, like, I'm going to take space because it doesn't make sense for me to, like, climb up that tree right now.
And so the original agreement of my previous partner's relationship with the metamor was that they would probably have, like, 2 dates a month kind of thing, maybe hang out, like, a lunch here or there, but that was about it. And in the first month, it all of a sudden was like, oh, running into them 3 times a week, 4 times a week. And I was like, this is really intense for me. It was quite destabilizing. The perspective was that, oh, Zandi's a poly guru, so they know the things. Like, they're cool with everything. And, like, I usually am, but, like, the way that this was shifting, I experienced insecurity. And I would say I experienced jealousy.
Of course.
I have found that anytime I'm experiencing some sort of, like, jealousy, which is so rare for me, it's actually because something is wrong. I should say, when dealing with, like, poly conflict, there's a really great thing where you, like, actually set intentional check-ins, right? There's a system called radar. I'm gonna read it off this thing.
Read it.
So radar is a relationship check-in that it's basically creating, like, a safe space for uncomfy topics. You do it in sort of, like, a formulaic way so that everyone knows what to expect every time. So it's not, like, shocking. And you also do it even when you're still, like, in a good space in the relationship. It's just about, like, really setting this time. So anyways, radar means it's you're doing a review of, let's say you did a month since your last one. So what happened in the last month, right? You agree to an agenda. So it's like, we're going to have a talk about quality time. We're going to talk about our relationships. We're going to talk, you know, like,
things that might come up that you want to address or discuss.
And then you have a discussion. And then you have action points. So, and it's a nice way of, like, saying it in this way. There's, like, slightly business way, because it's, like, a little less personal, because things can feel really personal when you're saying, I feel hurt about this particular experience. And then the last thing is about doing a reconnection moment. So you soften it after you've done all of that, like spending time like holding each other, like the physical comfort or something like that, right?
I love that.
Yeah, and it helps with sort of minimizing like day-to-day processing. So if you're just like, oh, this thing happened just now, I'm gonna talk about it, right? And it's like, then that can end up being like this like critical voice constantly, like, you know, impacting the relationship and your partner. But then there's also a thing where like people just hold things in and then it implodes or explodes, right? And so then it's like they can go, okay, I'm going to write that down. Yeah. I'm going to feel my emotions so that I'm distant from the like reaction and then know what I actually am there for.
You know, that's resonating for me because I'm like, oh man, because it's a roller coaster sometimes, obviously. And
when you can take the reaction out of any kind of conflict, like, and then you get to actually discuss what you felt and the reflection and like all the impact. It's just the best, because when you're reactionary, you're not really going to solve anything.
No.
Usually.
And
it's just going to be an argument.
And in my experience in a poly context is that if, you know, you can have all the best intentions in the world and say, yeah, go on this date. I love that for you. I'm excited. And then you come home and I'm like hurt, you know, not because of anything, just because of my own feelings. And it's like, okay, that would be a good opportunity to just feel it, write it down. Maybe it's a roller coaster on the other person and on yourself. If it's like, I was okay, I'm not okay. I was okay, I'm not okay. And it's like, and that's fair, totally fair. It's just one of those things where I like this idea of radar. It can be like, okay, like, does this person need to come on the ride with me?
Yeah. I was very curious when the whole idea of cheating was brought up as like, what does that look like in poly relationships? But I'm feeling like I understand that it's when you've set clear boundaries. Obviously you have good communication with your partners from the get-go in these types of relationships. Any relationship you should. And so when those boundaries start to be crossed, that's when the cheating, because you can't define it by like a physical act or something like that as much as it is what you've discussed, what's the intentions, what you've committed to.
Yeah, it's breaking something. It's going against something that you had said you would do or wouldn't do.
The understanding, the agreement, the commitment.
So there's a term called cowboying. Do any of you know that?
No.
So, or you can be a cowboy, cowgirl, cow person. It's a monogamous person trying to basically take a poly person from their own herd and become, like, take that person and make them monogamous.
So would you say that a cow person is someone who has absolutely no real intention of being in a poly relationship? So their intentions going in is to kind of manipulate and kind of lie to wiggle their way in and get the attention of whoever and then wiggle their way back out.
Whether they realize it or not, I think sometimes people might be a cow person with genuinely lying to themselves or really believing like, no, I can make this work. It's not easy to be poly, I get that, and I get that we're all in different places. If the person that you're with is having intentional time with somebody, it's work to get to a place where you're comfortable with that. Yeah. It's doable. It's doable. It's not because it's hard that you need to, in that moment, impose yourself into the situation. It doesn't mean that you're wrong for it being hard.
Exactly.
Like I have found so much joy for me, and there's a word for it. Maybe Zandi will know. There's a word when you can actually experience joy from your partner being with somebody else and enjoying that time together.
Compersion.
Like if and Jay is an open person. She's not poly. It's something that she's trying out, and that's where we're at. That being said, Jay has had tons of adventures, and I mean, I love my alone time. I'm not gonna lie, like I fucking thrive when I'm like I get a chance to do my things. But if Jay's out enjoying herself, and I want to know, for me, I want to know how the sex was. I want to know, what the conversation was like. I want to know, like, if she wants to tell me, of course. But when she's over there, I don't want to be up in her business, like, calling, And sometimes you get those, even the, like, most confident of people, like, you might get a moment where you're like, oh, if you're finding yourself doing that, I get it. Just try to work on that. I feel like there's a lot of people out there that are like, well, I'm having feelings right now and therefore you're responsible for them. It's okay because I'm going to call you and I know you're having a Valentine's date, but I'm falling apart and therefore, and it's like, no, You falling apart, it doesn't make it okay to impose yourself into somebody else's intentional moment. Mm-hmm. And I promise you this, it may not be for everybody, but if poly is for you, you can get there. And you can find that joy in like having those moments to yourself or somebody else, sharing that moment with somebody else. But it's a beautiful thing. What did you call it?
Compersion.
Compersion is such a beautiful thing because it's like, fuck, my partner's having such a good time right now. They're experiencing this new relationship energy or this old relationship energy. I don't even care. It's one of those things where it's like, and I'm here doing my thing. Mm-hmm. And it's such a beautiful thing when you can experience that.
Well, and my partner at the time, what did actually make me feel safe originally was that anytime I've seen them like have crushes and like have a cute moment with someone, that energy gets displaced towards me as well. Like when they see me later, they're just like, wow, so amazing that I'm with you, and also like, oh gosh, and like extra touchy, all the things. So it's like, it's not like, oh, it only goes to this person, and it like reverbs. Yeah. And so that was a really nice thing.
So there's a big difference between honesty and transparency. And honesty is saying, you know, if somebody's like, have your feelings towards this person increased? Yes. It's up to us in a poly dynamic to communicate. There's nothing wrong if your feelings have increased. You have to be able to communicate and say, hey, I'm noticing that my feelings for this person are getting stronger and stronger. That way, you can never be wrong for being honest. You know, you have to give the other person the opportunity to say, well, this is okay. Thank you for this information. This is how I'm going to take it. Then I can make a decision on my own. It's, you know, it's when you think that, well, unless they ask, it's like, if they don't ask, then I don't need, and it's like, that's not right. There's no right or wrong way to be poly. You know, it's like, if you want to be in love with two people, or if you want to have a primary or not, it's just all about communicating and being transparent.
Like having certain desires and feelings changing, those are things to communicate, and they can be really hard. Yeah. But being direct about those things, right?
And yes, mistakes happen. That is a fact. Mm-hmm. That is okay. It's all about communication and being able to be responsible for yourself. I've made mistakes along the way. That is a fact. I mean, it's no different than any relationship. And I liked what you said earlier about going into something and saying, what are your intentions for let's talk about it. Let's do this. And if something changes, then right away, transparency, communicate that. You know, like, we are all human. Love makes us do insane things sometimes, and it makes us feel all kinds of ways, and sometimes our trauma blocks us from even understanding what the fuck's going on. All you can do is speak your truth, and everybody's an adult, so you can't hold back information because you're afraid of what the other person's going to think. Yeah. Because you have to understand that people can handle the truth. It may break their heart, it may hurt them, but you know, you'll be speaking your truth even if you're confused in the moment.
I think in my case, what was so wonderful to realize is that as far as like secure attachment goes, secure attachment is a community experience. So like when my world fell apart in those moments and I felt so hurt, it was the fact that I had a whole like friend circle and network of relationships that supported me in that instance, right? Mm-hmm. In different types of support, you know, and I think I would have struggled a lot more if I didn't have that. And I know I've had, you know, really jarring experiences in the past where I had no like network of like people who love and care about me, and those took a really long time for me to like feel safe and secure again, right? And so like I think when we think about like a poly dynamic and relationship, the fact that you do have other people around might allow you to like get your needs in other places and not project them onto certain people, and then also feel more secure and not alone when you're like in these situations where there is a break, you know?
Well, we've learned a lot of terms today.
We've learned so many terms.
Anchor, which I really like that one.
Radar,
which I think that would be great for any kind of relationship. Yeah. I like that acronym.
Which one was my favorite when you experienced joy for somebody else?
Compersion.
Compersion, that's my new word.
Compersion, secure attachment, primary, the hierarchy. And
so, to end this off, if I can ask, to those people watching out there that are considering, we had our last video, we had people being like, this is great because I've been thinking about it. What would be your number one tip for somebody that is considering a poly lifestyle?
Wanting to explore it, or potentially might...
Or somebody in it right now that may not be, like,
might be
doing so well.
Yeah, I think that there are, like, two things. I think really understanding like your values and your needs is like core importance. I realized that a lot of the time I would just be like, yeah, you seem great. The chemistry's fun. And not actually being like, do you match what I think is important in life, right? And so a betrayal to me might not be a betrayal to someone else because their value system doesn't match up, right? Yes. And communication, like, people talk about communication all the time, but it's so scary for so many folks. And like, properly, like, sitting down and, like, thinking out what you want to say to someone before being in, like, a reactive space is, I think, like, super important. Yeah. And like, you know, there's different ways of communicating, but, like, making sure to say, like, I feel statements, like, taking ownership of, like, your actions and your things, instead of being like, you made me feel, like, you know, like, there's just, like, so many spaces and, like, we need to be taking on our responsibility.
Yeah. Accountability.
Yeah. Accountability. So make sure that there's a matching value system and communication. Over communicate. I'm an over communicator. I'm always like, I'm over communicating right now. This is what's happening in my head. You're not responsible for that. I'm dealing with it. Just if I'm being weird, that's what's happening. That's how I talk to people all the time. Yeah. And it's like so much easier for me because I used to be the opposite where I was like, shut down.
Yeah.
And it was like, nobody was getting in there. Thank you so much for coming by today.
I feel like I've learned a lot.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and a lot of these things can just be, like, for anybody, really, in any kind of relationship. It does just kind of seem like it's all the same. You just have your boundaries and respect and open, really transparent communication. I mean, that's, like, the cornerstones, I think, of any successful relationship, really.
And triangulation can happen with your mom.
Oh, yeah.
Or a coworker.
Triangulation, that's another one.
Yeah.
So many. So good. Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, and thank you for watching. Yeah. Subscribe if you haven't already.
Yeah. And we'll see you guys in the next one.
Yeah.
Bye.
That was good. Better is what I say every time. That was good.